I'm just about to run off into the woods here to pick some chanterelle mushrooms. I was by this patch that usually produces every year, and I saw some orange buttons coming up like a week or less ago. So I think they're going to be just right, hopefully. We're going to go pick those, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to show you a recipe that I figured out that's probably the best chanterelle recipe that I have. It's chanterelles with maple syrup kind of glaze thing. It's just really good. Looks like I need to come down here and make charcoal out of all, look at all these limbs, crazy. That's why I'm coming up with this my new remote biochar production method, so I can come into areas like this and just make charcoal out of this kind of stuff. Like this tree died from sudden oak death and then fell over, and it just all these limbs here, and it's a big fire hazard. A couple of hours and I could have a big old trench full of charcoal. Maybe quite a few hours. But charcoal is forever. And here we go. This is what we're talking about. There we go, now you can see. Okay. So we'll see what these are like. They look good. They look nice and firm and pretty young. Yeah, that looks really nice. So I can't tell you the species name on this. I mean, I've been eating it for years. It's just, you know, to me it's just orange chanterelle. They come up in the same spots a lot. Like I said, this patch is a real reliable patch for me. Or did I say that? This one looks kind of buggy and weird, but honestly, that's probably still good. These are very durable mushrooms and not much liked by bugs. Very few bugs will actually eat these. Now that's a nice specimen. It's really clean. A lot of times they'll grow all in these big convoluted folds and full of dirt and stuff, and the caps are like a big cone, but this has a nice solid smooth cap, so it'll be easy to clean and it'll slice into nice big meaty pieces. I mean, this is a solid piece of mushroom here. Perfect. These are perfect for this recipe. And I think I'll just go ahead and leave this one to make spores, you know, and spread the species. Just clear out some dirt here, and that way the spores can float around and make a new chanterelle patch somewhere, which probably won't happen, but you know, it's definitely not going to happen if I don't leave any. Okay, so we need to clean these. They're often very dirty. This one actually isn't that bad. They also will often have big folds and creases that are full of dirt. So sometimes you have to wash them. If you have to wash them, do get rid of some of the dirt first by scraping like I'm going to do. And you can also use like a brush, and then try not to get too much water in them. These absorb water like a sponge. So what you can do is just lightly wet the top and then rub it and kind of loosen up all the dirt, and then just, you know, quickly run it under the tap like this and just tap it and brush all the dirt off. Because if you hold it under the tap or sit it in a bowl of water or keep running it under the tap a lot, it will just get completely soggy. I mean, you can still cook it the same way and it'll turn out just as good, but it's going to take a long time to get that water out. You know, minimize the amount of water that it absorbs. But the technique we're going to use will deal with the extra water, so if you have to wash it, you don't need to hesitate to wash it. Or you can just do this. Like what I'll probably do is scrape off almost all the dirt and then just do a quick run under the tap, rub it a little bit, and then do one last quick rinse, and that should get everything. And you know, go ahead and you can cut off some of the dirt. This actually has dirt incorporated into the mushroom itself, like it grew into the stem. This is a very nice sample. It's very solid and firm, and it doesn't have a lot of creases to hold dirt. I find that the mushrooms that grow later in the season, because these have already been out for a little while, the later ones tend to be more compact like this. They're smaller, but they're much cleaner and much more like these solid little things that look like regular mushrooms instead of a big folded weird trumpet kind of thing. Okay, so I'm just going to rinse this off real quick, just like I described, and then we'll get on with it. Okay, you want nice clean slices if possible. Try to make them all the same thickness. I'm going to go for about a quarter, 3/16, something like that. But if they're even, they'll take about the same amount of time. Having uniform slices will just facilitate them all being done at, you know, about the same time. Looking good. Let's cook. Now you want to use a pretty big skillet because the mushrooms need to be laid out in a single layer. Some butter, plenty of butter. They absorb a lot and butter's good. Use a lot of butter. Do you see how yellow that butter is? That's quality butter. And look for grass-fed butter. So Kerrygold is a good reference butter. Also Anchor brand from New Zealand. Sometimes you'll find Finnish butter or other Irish butters, or just something local that's advertised as grass-fed. The Organic Valley grass-fed cultured butter is usually really good. And often these will be more expensive, but just do yourself a favor, get one of them. Take that home and get, you know, another whatever cheaper butter and just taste them. You know, just eat them straight up. And the difference is huge. There's no substitute for grass feeding. So you see there's more liquid in the pan now. So this is the water cooking out of the mushrooms. And what we need to do is just cook that water out and then start to evaporate it. And eventually there'll be less water in the pan and the mushrooms will start to fry a little bit in the butter. And we just have to be patient and wait for that. Don't try to rush it too much. It just is a process that takes time. That's the one thing about this dish. It's really easy and simple, but it does take time and there's no substitute for that. So we're just gonna let that cook for a minute and get some other mushrooms ready. This is called candy cap. They're just a very small mushroom that when they dry, they form a really strong maple syrup flavor. Very, very potent. So I just took a little piece of one of those. It doesn't require that much. Just that little bit right there. And I toasted that in a pan. The house already smells like maple syrup just from toasting this little mushroom. And I'm just gonna crush that up a little pestle here. I just toasted it so that it would crush. See how easy it crushes? So now it's nice and powdered. Now I want that in my mushrooms cooking in there to really infuse the whole dish with that flavor. So that's going to go in the pan right now while there's still some liquid left. Right, so the candy cap's been in there cooking for a little while. And I see these are starting to brown. That's what we want right there. That little bit of color. Don't let them go too far, but definitely get that. That's really important to get that. The mushrooms themselves should actually be caramelized like that. And the ones I put in first are way ahead of the other ones. They're also smaller. So whatever you have to do, you know, I'm gonna have to take some of these out early. Just get them all cooked to the same degree. Just going to scoot some of these off so they cook slower. And it already smells amazing. Now the way I came up with this is that chanterelles, if you cook them like this, when you caramelize them, they actually have a maple syrup flavor already. Like real mild, real subtle, but it's definitely there. So I just wanted to accentuate that. Also toasted a few walnuts here. Looks like I overcooked them a little bit. That's okay, they'll be fine. It's totally optional, but maple syrup and walnuts just go really well together. And we're down to the last two here. They look good. They're browned a little bit, that's enough. Now the maple syrup. Okay, maple syrup. This is excellent with pancakes, bacon, traditional American breakfast sausage, you know, with like lots of sugar and sage, ham, you know, obviously eggs go with all that stuff, waffles, whatever, breakfast stuff. So if you're doing it with pancakes, you could make this into a syrup by just adding a lot of maple syrup, or if you're using sugar, because you don't have to use maple syrup. In fact, if you have candy caps, you don't need maple syrup because you can just use sugar and then use candy caps and it'll taste like maple syrup. But you can either, you know, if you use sugar, you can add more water, or what I usually do is cook this down just a little bit and begin to caramelize it. Like I don't caramelize it all the way to the point where it's going to make something like toffee, which would be brittle when it cooled. But I want it to thicken and start to caramelize the the sugars and the maple syrup. And you can also do that, start to thicken it a little bit and start to caramelize the sugars and the maple syrup, which just adds a whole new dimension of flavor. See how it's getting really thick now? And then add water back and make syrup. So then you'll have like a caramelized maple syrup, and that's really good. I'm also going to throw in a little more salt. I mean, there's already salt in the butter. More salt's good, I think. So now you see it's starting to get this kind of ropey look. Okay, well that's caramelized right there. So you can either add more water back to it at that point or just use it this way, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put in my mushrooms real quick, turn the pan off. I'll go ahead and put my walnuts in there. Just make sure everything's coated really well, and that's it. Get all of this delicious glaze. I'll lose that one there. Again, great on pancakes, great on good winter squash. I mean, it'll make bad winter squash better, but good winter squash will complement this. Bad winter squash will dilute it, you know. If you get a good, rich, high sugar winter squash, buttercup, kabocha, yeah, that'll complement this, you know. Yams or sweet potatoes would be good. It's just so good the way it is like this that I'll just make it and eat it like this. Amazing.